James Taylor is one of the great performing artists of our time. He's a North Carolinian, and he's also from Chapel Hill, and you'll meet him in just a minute.
Production of North Carolina People is made possible by a grant from Wachovia Bank, a symbol of strength, stability, and service for over a century.
James, it's good to have you back home again. You were here to help us launch the university's big bicentennial effort, and you had a glorious concert in the Dean Dome last night. Grand to see you.
It's great to be here, Bill.
Chapel Hill, I know you haven't had much of a chance to ride around, but having grown up here, I'm sure your roots are deep in this town.
It's true, you know, I can't seem to really identify my place, any other place as home aside from Chapel Hill. I really think of this as being where I'm from, you know. There's something about the region that maybe it's that my father's family's from down here, or that the period of time that I spent here was so formative, but it means a lot to me for sure. Yeah.
Last evening you had 14,000, 15,000 people in the Dean Dome, and I couldn't help but remember that when you were a boy here, you used to wander through the woods and come over that very site coming into town. You and your brothers and sister, you just had a lot of fun wandering around out there, didn't you?
That's right. That was, there were sort of territories, you know, that you're aware of, but one of the things that I remember so in such a sort of immediate and physical, tactile sort of way about growing up here is the landscape of it. And there's, you know, the clay, the soil, you know, and the trees and the landscape of it, just the topography and the way it feels. That's, I remember having been away from North Carolina for about 10 years. There was a period of time in the 70s when I didn't come down at all. And then a tour took me through North Carolina at some point, and I was staying in a motel room. I remember walking outside in the evening. We had a night off, and smelling honeysuckle and looking across a field at sort of dusk it was, and seeing the pine trees, the loblolly pines on the far side of the field, and sort of a hint of red dirt there as in the ditch. It just hit me, you know, that as some sort of a profound, resonant kind of a memory, and I feel like that's really sort of in my blood, you know.
Your mother was one of the really creative spirits around this town those years ago, and she and your dad went out there and built the first modern home in Chapel Hill, and from then until now, I'm sure she's been that kind of influence in your life.
Yes, she really is. It's true. My appreciation of her sort of unique individual talent has continued to increase, you know, as I get some distance on what it was like for her in those days, and really what a creative and energetic thing she did here in Chapel Hill. She was raised in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and this was a very adventurous thing to do, to move down here with 4 young children and a 5th on the way, to start a life down here in Chapel Hill. And it was, she really, you know, out there beyond the 15501 bypass there on the edge of Morgan Creek, she really made a statement there with that sort of Frank Lloyd Wright inspired house and the gardens and around it, and her greenhouse and the furniture that she chose to put in it and the artwork and stuff. And I think also that, you know, she would take us up to New York City, and sort of little parties of us would go up there to take in some theater or a museum, or she was always sending us on some, you know, excursion to learn something. And she she was very, like I say, very energetic.
But she really introduced you to nature and animals and plants and birds and so much that people see and hear in your music now.
I think it really is true. I owe an awful lot to her.
Well, in my mind, I'm going to Carolina. It has lines in it about the dogs that bite. Can't you see the moonlight? And
Yeah.
those are all reflections of Morgan Creek, as I hear you.
It's true, you know, when I was talking earlier about that sort of visceral kind of memory, the time I wrote that song, I wrote it in two different episodes of writing it. One was in London. I was working with the Beatles. I'd been signed by Apple Records, which was their label. It was 1968. It was an amazingly exciting time to be. They were recording their White Album at Abbey Road. At Trident Studios at the time, and I was working also sort of in the interstices in between. When they were in the studio, I'd go in and cut a couple of tracks, and McCartney played on one song, and Harrison sang on another one, and you know, it was amazing, an amazing sort of acceleration for me. I just couldn't believe it because I was so into their music, you know. So, but I was away from home and from the United States, and I had this when the song refers to a holy host of others standing around me, that's sort of referring to sort of being embraced by that. So I started to write the song there, and then while I was in London working on this album, I took a trip down to Spain with a friend of mine, and the rest of the song sort of came to me there. But it was as if some as if some direct and very strong tug and an identifiable sort of physical presence was calling me back to, you know.
Quite apparent, but I think, James, that about 6 million North Carolinians make that the new alma mater of the state almost. To hear it played so often around, everybody loves it. So, writing music, how difficult is that when you start composing? You get the idea of the lyric first, or the rhythm, or do they come together some way as you work?
Yeah, I think they come together. I think that you know, I usually answer that by saying that it's not a controlled process. I don't.
Either or.
Yeah, I don't really have much direction over it. It always happened as a kind of subliminal kind of a thing, you know, that just occurs. And the main thing with me about writing music is to give myself enough time to let that thing happen, because now with a much fuller life than I used to have, a lot of things can happen to crowd it out and just to preempt that time that's needed to write. But I think that lyrics and music a sort of cadence to language. You know, when you hear little children when they're pre-verbal, they sound like they're talking, but basically they're just expressing the rhythms of language, you know, before there's anything. I mean, it may mean something to them. Without a question, it does, and it's probably much more valid than what we spout all the time. But at any rate, you can hear that sort of cadence in it. And I think that somewhere in the back of my brain I have a musical language connection that sort of comes up with both of these things at once. So typically what happens is that there will be an initial sort of iteration of a song that'll get some distance into writing it, and that's sort of a gift. You know, it just sort of occurs as if it's delivered on your doorstep, and then I have to go back and work at it to get the rest of it to finish up.
You know, some music and lyrics and composition have a romantic theme, others tell stories, but you've lived through an age when many of the songs were expressions of anger and protest and vigor and dissent. What do you see happening in the minds of young people today as you move around the world?
Well, I personally feel as though the world is on the edge of a transformation from one type of human activity to to another, or one way of organizing human activity to another. And I think it's approaching a sort of global synthesis. I think that it has to do with the numbers of people who are on the planet. I think that, and also with global communication and just kind of a saturation of the planet. And I think that what looks like a very confused period, that's what this feels like to me, will turn out to be, in retrospect, to be a period of transition into a more, if not a more stable phase, just a more sort of realigned phase, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, yes.
I think people are looking for, a lot of people are looking for representation in the sort of global consciousness.
When you speak of environment, you don't mean just what's happening in Morgan Creek area. You're talking globally now. The environment, hunger, suffering, these things are now humankind problems, and that's what you really sing about and write about, isn't it?
I think so. It's partially. I mean, mostly I write from a very personal point of view, and my songs are personal expressions. Mm-hmm. Even when they have more political or global themes, there's still a personal take on those things. But because that's just that's my style. But I'm very, I find that this is a fascinating time to live. On the other hand, if you had lived in Germany, for instance, and between the two world wars, I think things would have looked particularly apocalyptic then too, mm-hmm. or in Japan just after the Second World War. So I think that this is this is just it might be a narrow sort of personal view of things, that this great change is happening now.
No, I think you're right. But you and Reynolds Price have gotten together here recently. Reynolds is a distinguished professor and novelist at Duke. What went on there?
My wife Catherine was doing a piece for public television that was filming in Columbia, South Carolina. This is maybe 6 years ago now, maybe more, maybe 7 or 8. Called Private Contentment, that Reynolds had written. And at that time, she communicated with Reynolds, and we went back and forth some. They wrote letters to one another, and then I booked a concert in the Dean Dome, and she got in touch with Reynolds and said, listen, you've got to come out. And Reynolds said, well, I've recently had surgery and am confined to a wheelchair, and I just don't think, I could make that. But thank you very much, and maybe we can get together and visit. Well, but Catherine called back and said, well, we'll just figure it out. We'll make it work out, and James has a lot of people who can sort of help us out and stuff. So he came out to the show, and we hit it off immediately. Reynolds really feels like family to Catherine and I, and we visit back and forth a lot.
He's a great talent, James. He really is, and he's a very creative mind, and when you two get together, a lot of energy must fly there.
Yeah.
What did you write together?
Well, we wrote a song called Copper Line together, which is again a song about this sort of landscape, mm-hmm. Around sort of in a 10-mile vicinity of where we're sitting right now. I mean, 10-mile radius of where we are right now. Some of it is fictional and some of it is sort of true, but it basically just talks about this idea of remembering a landscape that you live in, and sort of connecting your thoughts and your memories with a physical space. Like that.
I'm sure earlier years in your career as a great performing artist, it was one-night stands, traveling a good deal.
Well, it still is.
And I'm going to ask, as the years have gone by, is it still that much pressure and to get around? I know you're in great demand all over the world, but
well, it comes and goes, but yeah, sure. It's a cyclical thing. I typically will start by a period of trying to write some songs and assemble them into the sort of unit of work in my line of endeavor is an album, record album. It's about 12 songs. When I get that together, we go into the studio and make an album, and then that will be followed by about 1.5 years or 2 years of touring, you know, and that'll happen, and there'll be one big 6-month stretch that'll eat up a summer, you know, from a spring to a summer to a fall, and then little isolated bits of work in between, and some benefits here and there, or maybe some, you know, new things. You got to make a video if you can scrape the money up for that, or we'll film a concert, or try to figure some way to promote it without humiliating ourselves too terribly, and you know, so that's the way. There are slow periods and then intense periods of work. So.
Now here we are on November 12th, and you're going from here to Appalachian and then into the Northeast, and after Thanksgiving you'll be up at Brown, and will that end the fall tour for you this season, somewhere along there?
Yes, that'll do it. We're recording this tour to try and make a live album. And that's, then I'll go into the studio and try to assemble that with my co-producers. And then when that's finished, then I've got a couple of benefits coming up in the spring, but those are isolated, and generally speaking, I won't do anything until I get back in the recording studio, and that, you know, I've got to accept, and won't do anything but write.
James, being a creative person, there's an awful lot of discipline in this. I know you rehearse, good as you are, you rehearse, as all great artists do, but how do you organize your time when you're taking you're going to compose the next series of music? You finish the tour, you'll take 6 months, you'll do your creative development there. It's not from 8 to 5 and then you move by.
That's the best way to do it if you can.
Really discipline yourself that way?
Yeah, if you don't really defend the time and sort of schedule it in, it'll get eaten by something else. Mm-hmm. And you know, that's one of the things that I remember from North Carolina, and I'm most thankful for, is that there was empty time. There was real space. I mean, there was time to kill, time that at the time felt just, you know, like unrelieved boredom. We'd go out and wander around in the woods, you know, just, you know, look at trees or just a lot of empty time. When I see my kids growing up now in Manhattan and Massachusetts, it seems like there's just never a dull moment. I think, I think dull moments are really valuable. You know? Very valuable. Yeah.
You'll have to pack them up and bring them down here for an extended 2 weeks and let them wander out there where you wandered.
Well, you have to take them pretty far away from civilization. Yeah, that's true. We've done that sometimes.
What do you have in mind as your next series of compositions? Are you thinking that far ahead?
I've got some
topically?
I've got some things started. Mm-hmm. I have sort of, you know, I have some starts.
Yes.
And I keep notes on them, and I'll start trying to assemble them and pin them down a little bit when my time frees up.
When young people gather around you after a concert, as I'm sure they do at every college town you ever go to, and they come to ask you, you know, what about music as a career? What about what you've done, and what is there out there for us? What do you say to young people today, Jane?
Well, I think it's difficult to think of, for me to think of music as a career. I would advise people to have a plan B if they were career-minded. If they were committed to, you know, to making music and that's all they loved and all they wanted to do, well then that's fine. It's got its own motivation. It doesn't, you know, just be careful not to, you know, make sure that you're lonely and free for a while and you can travel light if you want to. If you want to allow the thing to develop, don't weigh it down with an awful lot of other things. But you know, when people ask me how do I get an entrance into the business, how do I make this into a career, how do I make my living at it, I really never know what to answer except to say, you know, if you love it, it has its own energy and its own reason for being done, no matter what your circumstances are. And basically, you just have to play all the time. Play whenever you can. You know, if you're a painter, paint when you can. Talk about it, you know, live it, be in the company of other people who are doing it and interested in it. And you know, sooner or later it will find a way it'll make a life for you, you know.
Do people respond to music the world over in pretty much the same way? Do you find that it touches people in ways that is singularly music's way of intervening in our lives, which is wonderful?
You know, it's true. I mean, the cliche is that you know, music is the universal language. Everybody always says that, especially when you're sort of traveling abroad. Everybody always says, you know, music is the universal language. In fact, it is sort of, the thing about music is that it's a harmonic structure, you know. It has the cadence of language. It has sort of expresses human consciousness through lyrics and stuff. But the other thing is that it has this sort of link with the physical world, with physical sort of science. You know, the overtone series, or what we consider to be harmonic or not harmonic, relates very much to sort of physical law, you know.
Yes.
And so it really connects us with the cosmos, you know, you know, the same things that make the same laws that affect whether or not something is harmonic to us affect the orbit of a comet, you know, or the spectrum of light as it manifests as color to us. And there's something, you know, that's
everywhere.
Profound, you know, and it's pre-verbal and it's pre-conscious. I mean, animals
Sure.
love music, you know. So.
Will you be going
we as
overseas again soon?
We were in Europe in May. We're overdue to play South America and Asia again. So my guess is that'll be in the next round of the next campaign. Will take us there.
How about records now? You say you're doing
We'll make
this as
this
a live
live.
concert.
Yeah, we'll
series.
make this live
Does that
one.
take a lot of editing?
The thing about it is that you want to stay current with it. You want to listen to it every night, the sort of reference tapes that we make from the board every night, so that you don't get swamped by it, because it's a lot to wade through all that stuff. And yes, it'll take a lot of editing to.
Do you actually do that yourself?
Yeah.
You set the standard and measure the quality that has to please James Taylor.
Yeah, well, you know, that's that. I don't trust anybody else to do it.
Where were you in Europe this last tour?
We started in Portugal. We played Spain. We played in a lot of jobs in Italy. We're popular in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Played Hamburg and Paris and London.
You're always popular in London.
We did do well there. England is good for us.
Our daughter Mary lives over there, and she tells us about your appearances, and she's a lawyer over there.
Oh yeah.
Speaks of Chapel Hill spirit the way you do, even though she's far, far from home.
You know, there's something about North Carolina as a region. Maybe other people feel this about Indiana or Kansas, I don't know. But it just feels as though it's an identifiable region, you know, that it is a real place. That it hasn't, maybe it's that it hasn't been swept by the same drastic economic changes or changes in population and stuff. But it really feels like an identifiable zone.
Well, James, we've used up all of our time, but before you get on the bus and head to Appalachian, I hope you can go out Mason Farm Road and breathe deeply and renew your spirit for another generation of travel. But thank you for joining me on North Carolina People. It's grand to see you.
Thank you, Bill.
Can't you just feel the moonshine? Ain't it just like a friend of mine? You hit me from behind. Yes, I'm gone to Carolina in my mind. Gone to Carolina in my mind. And I'm gone to Carolina in my mind.
Production of North Carolina People is made possible by a grant from Wachovia Bank, a symbol of strength, stability, and service for over a century.